What's been most difficult about your marriage?
Well, I'll speak to like we've had a few circumstances that we've walked into that would tend to be like a season of marriage that have been challenging. When we had been married 4 months, David's dad passed away, and that was a really hard thing, obviously. But just to be so like young in our marriage, that was
it was sudden, unexpected, tragic.
And so that was really challenging to work through. And then we had 2 baby boys within 20 months of each other. So I would say like just having them so close, and then dealing with some postpartum depression and just the issues that come with having little kids that you're raising, and just so drained and trying to understand and communicate with one another. That was a really challenging season. And then in 2008, that was another really challenging season when David was going through his issues with anxiety that he kind of alluded to earlier with counseling and that kind of thing. So those were 3 seasons, I think, that were really challenging. And God gave us grace in moving, through those.
We sensed with each one, these are the things that, they're outside of us. Excuse me. They're outside of us, and they can either push us together as a couple, or they can like hop over us and start to push us apart. And the outside circumstances that happen in your life, even some of them being outside of our relationship, like my anxiety that I was dealing with was not in relationship to something between us. It was because of my Enneagram motivations to be successful and be a workaholic, frankly. I put myself in an anxious place. She didn't ask for postpartum depression, and it just kind of came for a little while after she gave birth to our second child. So those certainly. We've had some moments along the way. Probably one of the biggest moments, and we learned a lot from it, was our 3rd year of marriage, when I basically let my attention drift to my job and my students instead of her. And we were in that season of moving from the honeymoon stage of our marriage into the realistic phase of our marriage. And the Enneagram now gives us insight into what was happening back then. We didn't have it to tell us. We actually were talking in the recent week even about what would have happened if we had known the Enneagram to explain what happened. But basically, in essence, really quickly, it was a period where that attention of students, and in particular, there were 5 cute 18-year-old seniors in high school who would be at my desk every morning. I was 27 years old at the time, and one night, Betsie looked at me and she said, "You love the attention of your students more than you love being with me." And I looked at her and I said, "You're right, and that's wrong." And it was a wake-up call for us of how easy it is to drift, and a wake-up call of what are you going to do with this, that in the honeymoon phase, you just want to be with each other, and you have this mysterious desire to know one another, and you start to lose mystery as you move into realistic phase of your marriage, and you can have something else draw your attention. Well, as 3s, we want to be loved and valued, and we think that we're loved and valued for what we do. That's our wounded message. We think that we have to do things for people to love us. Well, these students, I had a great relationship with my students. They gave me lots of value and want and love, frankly. And so I was drawn that way. And it jerked us back. It was months of sharing with our small group, of reading, of submitting ourselves to each other, and realizing okay, we have the opportunity to really get to know one another. And to think that after 2-3 years of marriage, we know each other and the mystery's gone, that's just crazy. 20 years of marriage, the mystery's not gone. I don't know her fully. And so that was a seminal point in our relationship that I think has actually helped us in future years to be protected from some other things that could have happened.
So, Betsie, let me ask you, because this is, thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and your authenticity in all of this, because I know that that's really hard, and I think that a lot of people will gloss over it. But I think that a lot of people who will be watching this are either in the midst or have gone through things like that. What practical advice, like sharing in the small group is good, but I think it's not specific enough for somebody to say, who's watching this and go, I'm in that season right now, what could I do? what practical advice would you give them?
Well, I would say if you need to go to counseling, like go to counseling. Like it's so easy to just think like, oh, that's not for me, or like you have to be really broken for that. But it's like the truth is we all benefit, and it's a wonderful tool that can be used, I think, for growth and healing.
Okay, David, what are some practical things, like what were some specific things that you did in the midst of that to provide healing in your marriage?
We read a really important book, actually. Our small group had decided to read Intimate Allies by Dan Allender, and that was very important. And because we were reading that together, the conversations, there came a chapter and a thought in there that to this day, when we do, excuse me, to this day, when we do premarital counseling, we talk about one of the center points of that book because it was so important to us to get through that time. So counseling for sure, like asking people for help, and we've both done that in our journey together. But then what can you read? And yes, the small group is really important. Like who around you then is going to help you? Who are you talking to? Who am I going to talk to say, hey, I just had this conversation with my wife and admitted this, and because she called me out and she's right, and I now need you as my friend to help me figure out what's going on inside of me that I'm wanting this attention from students more than I want my wife's attention. So people, you just can't do it alone.
So what was the message that Allender brought about in the book that was so pivotal?
Yeah. Pedestal effect.
The pedestal effect.
You have your spouse on the pedestal. I had Betsie on a pedestal.
So tell me more about that, Betsie.
Well, David would just say, like, everything that he did was related to me, and like he had me on this pedestal, like I could not do anything wrong. And so, I mean, that was really interfering with our marriage. So I think you've said, like, even if he dropped a dish in the kitchen, like somehow he would turn that into like,
if you dropped a dish,
Oh,
I would
sorry,
say it's
if
my fault. Like,
yeah.
I should have cleared the counter space, or I should have
Yeah.
made sure that dish was dry so that it wouldn't slip out of her hands. Like emotionally, that's what I was doing to her.
You would blame
she was
yourself,
not
yeah.
asking for it. She was not asking for me to have her on this pedestal. She was not unwilling to say if she made mistakes.
You have a two-wing?
I do.
Because I'm a two, and that's
So
something
you're
a two would do.
resonating, right?
Yeah.
But I had her there. And part of it, I mean, this may sound really silly, part of it went back to the fact that when I first met her, like, she was untouchable to me. Like, she was this beautiful, kind, gentle, strong, sweet Southern belle that I had no business ever dating when I first learned of her at Taylor. And so but in a way, like, that carried on. But one of the keys in that was then I felt like that carried into nothing was a mistake that she made. It always came back to me. And so what it meant is I wasn't being honest. I wouldn't be honest to say, hey, this hurt me when you did this. Or this conversation, then feeling dismissed in this conversation, that actually hurt. Instead, I would reframe it into something like, well, I must have done something wrong that now I need to go fix. And I actually haven't thought about this till this moment, but it probably roots back in my Enneagram core of I can make everything successful. Like, that's part of my false self is not only am I driven by success, not only am I effective in what I do, I also think I can basically make anything successful. Right. So I reframe failure into success. So, well, if I'm at fault for something in our relationship, I'll just fix it and make it successful. And it's easier for me to take that on than to actually be truthful with her.